You see this? What you're looking at here is not pressure treating. What you're looking at right here is marketing. These colors are not the result of the CAC, we'll talk about that, pressure treating process. These colors are the result of staining, so that you and I buy these things because we think it'll look nice on our deck. Let me show you 6 different examples of various pressure treating systems, why they fail, and what you ought to think about when you're deciding what kind of pressure treated lumber do I need for my application. Now, a lot of you have perhaps seen, or you don't want to see this. See that? That is rotted right off. In 3 years, I cast this in concrete, put a little gate post on it, and it rotted off, even though it was ostensibly a more effective pressure treating regimen than on these. When you cast a piece of pressure treated material that is not rated for ground contact into concrete, you set up a situation where it is wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry all the time. Hold it in your mind that a post that is held with gravel is going to last longer than a post that's held with concrete. We'll talk more about that maybe. But in general, for residential use, your choices become incised, see those little slits, versus not incised. This is a function of retention, as it's called. That is, how much of the pressure treating liquid is soaked into and stays inside of the piece. Let's cut the ends off these 2 pieces and see if we can tell any difference. This, by the way, a friend of mine, Dan McGee, just invented. It's called a Smart Square Tools. Smart Square, this thing's pretty nice. Anyway, way to go, Dan. They both are retaining pretty well. That darker material is evidence of pressure treating. None coming in from this side, quite a lot coming in through the incising. You see that those cuts essentially increase the surface area of the board. So we'll talk about cracks and cuts transferring things inside these boards, but that's interesting. Let's check the end of this brown tone, Douglas fir, beautiful little stick. I'll move these out of the way. Look at that. At the incising, it goes way in. Came in pretty good from that side. Got a big spot right there with very little. But look at that beautiful board. That's dense Douglas fir, which tends to absorb pressure treating less than whitewood. These are known as hem fir. Hem fir encompasses grand fir, noble fir, hemlock, and pine. Those are the species I know of. Probably spruce also, although that's questionable. And it soaks up pressure treating great. Douglas fir, you have to force it in there. So if you're buying pressure treated lumber and you're cutting it up to make a deck, first of all, you got to recognize this stuff is not made for ground contact. And second, you need to make sure that you protect it as best you can wherever it's at, which you can do by buying something like this. This has as the active ingredient the same stuff that's put in these boards, but not near as much as it used to have. There used to be a Jasco product that had the Go Juice at about 25% by volume. This is 10% by volume. And I need a foam brush and rubber gloves. But the idea is anytime you make a cut or drill a hole in something that you want to last for a while, you need to discourage the bugs, the rot, and the decay by painting or sealing up the end with something that's made for it. Takes time. It's a hassle, but it's important. Okay, forget about posts for a second. Let's say you're building a deck. You've already got your posts, but you're putting in the structure of the floor diaphragm, and you've got a ledger against the wall, and it's spaced off so the water will fall through. And you've got your joists all cut to length, and you've sealed up the ends, you've treated the ends so the rot's not going to start there. And you're ready to drop them into the hangers. There's something you got to know. And that is, nowadays, there are hangers that are intended to be used with pressure-treated material outdoors and hangers that are not. This is an example of a Simpson LUS24. Great hanger. I've used thousands of them, okay? But in a wet, dry environment, the copper in here will eat that up. So what you want is something that in the Simpson line is called Z-Max. It's a little thicker, and it's got more galvanizing protecting the steel. It's a thicker coat of zinc so that it will resist the water in contact with the copper, in contact with the zinc. It's going to last longer. And don't forget this. If you're going to be using pressure-treated material, you've got to be using hot-dip zinc or stainless. I'm a fan of hot-dip zinc. Whether you are through the hanger into the rim joist, or whether you're nailing to mid-span blocks, whatever you're doing, make sure that it's a hot-dip galvanized or a stainless nail if you're going to drive it through this stuff. Let me show you the next biggest reason that pressure-treated boards fail. But before I do that, there's something I want to know. Which of the products that have come to market recently, the sleeves, the wraps, the paint-on processes that we use to protect the posts we put in the ground, actually protect the posts we put in the ground? I don't have any experience with it. I know what happened to this, and I'm afraid others that I've set in the ground over the last 40 years, and I'd be really interested in some real-world experience with what we can do to stop this from happening. Talk about taking one for the team. I just got a sliver out of this .40 ACZA. I'm motivated to dig it out if I can with my left hand, because pressure-treated slivers can behave badly. A good friend of mine, Eric Gerritsen, he's helped me before. He'll help me again. You'll see what he does on the channel. Retired from Gerritsen Building Supply after his family ran it for 100 years, was my source on this technical information. He knows pretty much everything about pressure treating. And the thing that he told me was, go to the American Wood Preservation Association website. It's overwhelming. But if you want the details, you can go there. But here's what Eric told me. The pressure treating, whether it's the residential types that we just talked about or the industrial types that we're looking at right here, are an envelope. They're an envelope, and as soon as you tear it open, something's going to get inside. Okay? So as you look at these boards, realize, particularly on this railroad tie, that is what wrecks posts. That's a heart center. You see that? That was the pith or heart of the tree. This is a classically boxed heart, and it always splits to the heart. And then the envelope's open, and the water and the spores of the fungus run in, and these things rot from the inside out. By the way, railroad ties are about the last holdout for creosote pressure treating. This is a pole barn 6x6. There's a particular type of pressure treating that is the domain of pole barn 6x6s. It's copper chromate arsenate. It's good stuff. But still, even though this did not have a heart center, I tend to select for that. See, the heart would have been down here somewhere. It's still trying to check, pointing towards where the heart was. Water and fungus will go in and out and rot this thing from the inside out. Which reminds me of a story. I've got a friend. He built a hay barn. He was new to this country. And so he built a barn with a loft and storage on the ground, and I was in there one day and there was tons, maybe 20 tons of hay up on the loft. And it looked to me like it was straining to hold it up. I said, man, is that okay? Yeah, that's fine. I've had hay up there like that for years. Okay. Well, a couple years later, with a similar hay load, one of his daughters came running into the house. Dad, the barn fell down. He went down there and that loft had failed, and the impact pushed that hay against the back wall of the barn, and the 6x6s were rotted off at ground level from the inside out and sheared. Keep that in mind. Treat the ends of your posts. Now there's another good example right here of what cracks do. I bought a bunch of low-grade 6x6s for cribbing. This was a crack that was in the 6x6 when it was pressure treated. An hour ago, I found the other side of that crack. That's how that board went together when it went into the pressure treating vat. This is a good example of what happens under the ground. The pressure treating went all the way in, all the way across. There should be some more residual right there. But that's what happens when there are checks and cracks in the wood that you put in the ground, whether it's pressure treated or not. We're working our way down to what is pretty much left is the pressure treating processes that are usually thought of as industrial, that really typically aren't available at certainly at the box stores. The box stores are never going to have it. And frankly, it's a hard thing to get a hold of either of these, but if you know the right people around here, you can get 0.40 ACZA pressure treating specified on a Doug fir 1 or better free of heart board. I bought this board probably 18 years ago for a pergola that I built for my friend Marv Hash. Free of heart, Douglas fir. When these things are new, they are often kind of a charcoal gray. Think of railroad trestles. Think of guardrail posts. It's fantastic. I love this stuff, and if you can get it, use it. Now, when these step up to 6 by 6 instead of 3 by 6, they become 0.60 ACZA, a higher residual retention of the pressure treating. But either way, it's just not going to rot. Now, let me see if I have written down here what the ACZA stands for. Okay, checking my field notes from my visit with Eric, ACZA stands for achromate, copper, zinc, arsenate. There's lots of good stuff in here. Probably it would be good on your cornflakes. I don't know about that, but it makes a really, really nice board if you can get it. Now these last two. We talked about railroad ties being creosote treated. It makes them last a long time, but not forever. The act of acting as a railroad tie tears it apart. And the boxed hearts, sometimes they have gang nails pressed against the end. Sometimes they're made out of oak, but they all finally wear out. And then what do you do with them? I mean, how do you get rid of a creosote-treated board? It's a problem. This, on the other hand, is the end of a power pole. I want to talk about this because this is going right here in my very own blacksmith shop. All right, this is the butt end, the bottom end of a retired power company phone pole. Right? They put these things in the ground 4 feet or 5 feet. I think this was in the ground about 4 feet. I'm guessing this is about 6'2" long. Let's see. 6'4", missed it. I'm going to cut it off at 5 feet to put my big leg vise on because the old one, which I'll show you in a second, had rotted out in the middle when I got it. But these things are treated with pentachlorophenol, I think. Not creosote anymore. The old power poles are black and they've got creosote on them and it worked good. But you can see they're serious about this. There's some sort of a test plug right there. There's the indication of maybe date or treatment facility. The treatment goes in a long ways. And these things, even though that had a little crack in the bottom, it takes an act of Congress to make that rot off. If we come around to the top, we'll get a look at just how far the pressure treating goes in to these Douglas fir poles. See that? Compare that to how it was doing in that residential pressure treating material. That's in there 2.5, 3 inches. And they put caps on the top of their poles, and these things last for a long time. But it needs to penetrate because when these guys climb these with spurs, you can see an old pole will have lots of deep penetrations from the hooks that they use to climb those poles to do their line work. Anyway, let me show you where this is going to go before we wrap this up. 20 years ago, I was given the entire contents of a railroad roundhouse blacksmith shop by Bill Vian. And one of the first things I had to do was locate one of the post vices he gave me. So Leo Folsom, another now departed dear friend, had a piece of a power pole. It was a little rotten in the middle. It's what I had. It didn't cost me anything. I set it in here, but these lag bolts never really get a hold because it's weak in there. So it's always this when I'm twisting and working. I'm going to take that other pole I just showed you, jerk this one out, drop that one in, and take that amount of ambiguity out of my forging process. But it wraps up like this. Pressure-treated lumber is an evil that we have to accommodate. When I say an evil, it is pressure-treated with stuff that you wouldn't want to, you don't want it on your hands much, and you certainly don't want your kids to be eating the slivers, and but we have to have it. Because the only thing worse than a board that's a little bit toxic is a board that rots and breaks, or a beam or a post that fails and people get hurt or people get killed. So when you buy a pressure-treated board and you're going to build something that matters, make sure it's the right one. Make sure you treat it in the right way. Make sure you use the right fasteners. Remember, too much is always enough, so bigger and stronger is going to last longer no matter what it has to deal with. I think that's true in every case. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman. Keep up the good work.